As you're well aware by now, the assignment for this particular module is actually making a mummy, dehydrating and desiccating some fruit or chicken or whatever you choose, as you can see from the assignment sheet. I thought what I'd do is show you what some of the students did in the spring semester for their mummy making projects, and this will give you a better idea of the final report, what it is I'm looking for. So let's move through a few of these. One of them used the natron method, the baking soda. Another used dry heat, and the others, the last group, actually made a chinchurro mummy out of a chicken. That was kind of fun. Now here we go. These folks, Christine Morali, produced her mummified apple out of natron, and as you can see, she used time and the weights, both of the control apple, as you can see, without the desiccant, and then later on the natron apple, and she recorded and kept all of the temperature and the desiccant. In this case there was none because of the control apple, and put a descriptive column in there as well. So she collected quite a bit of data on the control apple. The next data here is the apple with the desiccant, and as you're using the desiccant, if you choose to use the natron method, please remember that you might need to change it from time to time, just like the Egyptians did, because as the natron that is close to the body or close to the apple gets saturated, it's not going to absorb any more moisture, so it needs to be changed out periodically during the process. And here's the remainder of their data. Same mixture, and notice that in the center of this one, new mixture, moisture-laden desiccant discarded. All right, and what they did is they took measurements in terms of the weights throughout the procedure. And here's some pictures that they took. Control apples on the left, experimental apple on the right. Day 6 is the control apple, still slowly browning and decaying. The experimental apple is rapidly dehydrating and quite a bit darker, turning darker. And this is the weight of control apple subject in 12-hour increments for a 13-day run. So they're able to make a nice graphic representation of weight versus time. That's the control apple. Now look at the graph carefully, and this is the experimental apple. You can see that it lost weight more rapidly, particularly in the early phases of the experiment. And you can superimpose these graphs to make it more clear, or use bar graphs, whatever you want to do. But graphic representation of the data is, well, a hallmark of scientific study as well as other studies, and it helps us see graphically, visually, the differences between the control and the experimental apple in the use of natron. And the next group, Chelsea Nasso, used dry, warm, low humidity. And she used a control and experimental apple. You can see she set up her chart a little bit differently. And she set up the oven as per the instructions, so very, 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 very low heat. And it would be helpful to record the temperature if you can. But you obviously need something to measure the mass or the grams, how much that apple is dehydrating. Because what we're measuring in the as the grams reduce, what we're measuring is the loss of water volume weight. And as you can see at the end of the experiment, the control apple's on the right, the experimental apple's on the left. It's down to 0.2 grams, whereas the control apple is still at 25 grams. And there's a picture, little slices side by side. And the last group, obviously you can graphically depict the data that they produced as well. And the last group here was kind of fun. Nicole, Stephanie, and Cara made a chinchurro mummy. They kind of have their detailed description of the process, the time and work that they put into it. And what is important about this is to realize that the chinchurro mummy making project does take quite a bit of time. Now, as we continue on, following the experimental protocol, they continued to put their mummy together till finally they had beautifully clay-covered Chinchorro mummy, and they made it very, very pretty and attractive. They were going to bring it to class, but what happened was some of the bones, some of the tissue, some of the muscle was left on the bone, so it did start to smell a little ripe, and the skin wasn't completely dried, but they did put that back on. So I really applaud their efforts. But this gives you an idea of the kinds of reports that I'm looking for. You're trying to plot, in the case of the natron or the crypt, or there's another experiment there using plain salt and beach sand and then moist soil from just around the yard. Whatever comparisons you're making, make sure you have good, accurate weights, control for as many other conditions as you can, and plot them out on a graph. If you're making a Chinchorro mummy, the report that I presented here is it is more what I'm looking for, something descriptive, because this is more of a how do you say it, a labor-intensive procedure. And try to imagine what the ancient Chinchorros went through, the time they expended making an individual mummy when they should be out there fishing or weaving or whatever else they needed to be doing. So they used a lot of resources to produce the mummies. So anyway, I hope this gives you an idea of what we're looking for in the mummy making project.